I had a professor in college that spent an entire semester proving that most of us don't actually have opinions. We have reactions to language. And once I saw this, I couldn't unsee it. Let me explain. So, we live in a world where language is weaponized, politicized, and hyper analyzed. And the ability to translate is a superpower here in Earth School. It makes you harder to manipulate, harder to divide, harder to trigger. Knowing how to translate makes you more connected, more compassionate, more expansive. Instead of reacting to language at face value, you start understanding the meaning underneath it. And this changes everything. At least it did for me. So have you ever felt overwhelmed by how much information is coming at you every single day? Or have you ever noticed how quickly people jump to react to a single word or phrase? This is because language is a lot less reliable than we think it is. A lot of what feels like disagreement in the world right now isn't about completely different ideas. It's about how those ideas are being expressed and received. When I learned how to translate, not the vocabulary, but the essence underneath the words, everything opened up for me. I could suddenly hear what people meant, not just what they said. I could sit with people who use language I personally would not choose to use, language shaped by a different culture or religion or life view, and still understand them because I wasn't listening to the words, I was listening to the frequency beneath them. That skill has allowed me to connect with people across belief systems, backgrounds, and worldviews. People who on paper look like they disagree, but in reality, they're saying the same thing in different dialects of the human experience. Everything in this Earth School dimension is dual. Everything here has its pair of opposites, but they're not actually opposites. They're the same thing being expressed at different degrees. Hot and cold are both just temperatures that move along a spectrum, and one would not exist without the other, right? They're paired opposites. Language works the exact same way. It is a spectrum, a sliding gradient of meaning. And in an age where we are drowning in more information than any human nervous system was really designed to process, people are clinging to language as if it was the whole truth. So I had an experience in college that was my first real memory of me noticing the dualistic nature of language. I was a political science major, and throughout the semester, my professor kept giving us these small, ungraded quizzes. They were just a sheet with questions or statements, and you would just mark whether you agreed or disagreed with it. It took 2 minutes, and then we would turn it in, and that was that. There was no discussion, no grading, there was no feedback. This happened every few weeks. So same format, we would receive a sheet and we thought it was just the same thing over and over again. At least that's what we thought. At the end of the semester, he handed back all of the sheets, and as I started flipping through them, it clicked on the point of the exercise. So the statements and the questions on the sheets, on all of them, they weren't different. They were the same question, just written different ways using different words. So the same topic, same underlining meaning, but people were answering them differently depending on how it was phrased. So I might have agreed with a question on one of the quizzes, then disagreed with the same question on the next quiz as it was stated differently. Nothing about any of our core beliefs had changed during that semester. What changed was the language we were being presented with. And the language alone was enough to shift our perception, our emotion, and our responses to the exact same questions. That's when I started to see how limited language really is because, again, language is inherently dualistic. The words we choose activate different meanings, different emotions, different biases, even when we're talking about the exact same thing. One sentence can bring comfort to a person and then trigger another. Language is not truth, it is a filter. And if you don't understand that, you will misunderstand people constantly. Once I really understood that, I started paying less attention to the exact words people were using and more attention to what they were actually saying underneath them, because most of the time people aren't actually as far apart as it seems. They're just using different language to point at something similar, sometimes even the same thing. But if you stay at the level of the words, right, it looks like conflict, it looks like separation. I see this constantly, especially now, right? There's so much being said all the time from all different directions, and instead of developing a deeper capacity to interpret meaning, people are getting more and more focused on language itself, analyzing it, correcting it, reacting to it immediately. So I took this like somatics course a few years ago where this whole topic really stood out. The teacher was so terrified of using the wrong word and was so focused on trying to use the most inclusive language that she could barely teach the class. She could barely get out a sentence. She was stumbling over her words, apologizing, overcorrecting, trying to include everyone and offend no one. Then the students started chiming in, right? Because it opened up the door for opinion. So now they're like, I don't like that word. Can we use this phrase instead? That term doesn't feel, inclusive enough. And I remember thinking, we do not need more perfect language. We need more people who know how to translate. Because if you can't hear the meaning underneath someone's words, you will spend your whole life arguing with people you actually agree with. It became really difficult to learn the actual content of the course because the focus was so much on what words were being used or should not be used to appeal to a very large classroom of students. It felt like we were definitely losing something really important here, like the core of the content. There's a kind of intelligence in being precise with language, but there's another kind of intelligence in being able to move through it, to recognize that words are approximations, that they're pointing at something, but they are not the thing itself. If you learn how to do this, then you can sit with people who seem like they have completely different beliefs and start to hear the overlap. You're able to see the sameness or oneness within your fellow human. You're not as easily pulled into reaction. And when you develop the ability to listen that way, this is where a major shift occurs. Not in saying things more perfectly, but in listening more deeply, because language will always be limited, but meaning isn't. Have a good week.